Okay, before you say anything, I know I'm super late when it comes to talking about both of these games, but there has been some announcements with Deltarune's next chapter, and I'm sort of in my Undertale phase again, so I thought, why not talk about them? This is my second attempt at recording the script because I am what is known as an idiot, and I lost my previous audio, so I mean, I'm getting my fill of Undertale and Deltarune right now. So enough yapping, what is there to talk about? Undertale's been out for basically a decade now, and the last real update for Deltarune came out 2 years ago. But this video isn't me really talking about something new about the games, just stuff that kinda goes overlooked, and that is the horror of these games. Recently, I watched my sister play through these two games, and while she was playing Undertale, I noticed something very creepy. Well, creepy's poor phrasing. What I saw in Undertale was pretty horrifying. And then that's when I got the idea to make this video. These two games, despite them being relatively lighthearted and very goofy, have some genuinely unnerving moments in them, and I want to talk about them, so let's just start. I want to start off talking about one specific area in the game. It was this place that sort of gave me the inspiration to make this video. But I have to give y'all some context as to how we're even able to go into this location. So right now we're in a laboratory owned by a scientist named Alphys, and at this point in the game, she just got into a relationship with someone that she's been into for a while. And with this newfound confidence, she went into this hidden room that looks like a bathroom in the laboratory. Apparently, whatever is in this hidden room is a huge cause for all of Alphys's problems. So she decided to face them head on. If we also want to know what is the cause of her stress, we have to go into the room. This is the area that made me want to make this video. Probably the most scariest area in the game, but also the most overlooked, the True Lab. I think you can tell immediately why I find this place so fascinating. It's just silent the moment we walk into the True Lab, and the grimy design of the lab can be very jarring, especially when you compare it to other areas in the game. But the shift in the tone of the game is all intentional, and it's made even more clear what we're going to be going through down here the moment we enter the next room. The song Here We Are begins to play here, and the best feeling I can describe what I feel when I hear it is, I feel off. It's not like it sounds bad, but when you compare it to other area songs in the game, like Snowy or Another Medium, it just feels like we aren't even playing the same game. There's this sense of mystery in the song, and it kind of builds up a sense of anxiety in the player when they hear it. And it reaches its peak whenever we have our first enemy encounter. Before I show you that, let me show you what your average enemy encounter looks like in this game. Now here's what happens whenever we encounter our first enemy in the True Lab. This thing is called Memory Head. And as you can tell, it looks like a mess. When the battle begins, instead of hearing the basic battle music we hear whenever we encounter an enemy, we instead hear the song Amalgam. As you can hear, the song also sounds messy. The only way to beat this enemy and the other enemies down here, because yeah, there are more, is to act. If we act and select item, we're told the enemy put a piece of themselves in your inventory. When we look in our inventory, this piece of themselves is called a bad memory. When we try to use it, we consume it and it actually damages us. To my knowledge, this is one of the only items in the game that can damage us, if not the only item. If we act and pick sell, we're told you hear voices through the receiver. After we finally find out how to beat Memory Head, they fade into the darkness and the music just cuts abruptly. This enemy is weird on its own, but we fight several other enemies similar to it. There's only really 2 other enemies I want to talk about. Give me a quick second before we talk about them, since there's some other stuff I want to discuss. I love how the enemies attack you down here. Every enemy we encounter seems like they're hiding from us. Now, what do I mean by hiding? In my opinion, there's only 2 ways you could take this. Option 1, they're hiding from fear of you, but you could also take it as like a predator hiding from its prey and finding the right time to strike. Usually every enemy we run into down here attacks us, but there's 2 exceptions. One encounter is when we enter this bedroom and we hop on the bottom left bed. And as we explore throughout the True Lab, we can walk into this bathroom. These 2 moments are fantastic at building up suspense. I love moments like this in games, movies, anything, to where a jump scare is so obviously being set up and making us anticipate it to only deliver nothing. Despite feeling a little relieved, now we're just left with this anxious, empty feeling. We experience these emotions throughout the entire True Lab, and especially in the fights with the 2 monsters I mentioned earlier. If we're gonna talk about them, let's start with the one on the right, because the one on the left is very special. Our first encounter with this enemy takes place in this foggy ventilation room with these weird white particles floating in the air. We walk to the end of the room and we see a switch. This fight somehow manages to find a way to be even more odd and eerie than the other fights we go through down here. There's not even a creepy song playing in the background, it's just this odd ambience. Or can you even call this ambience? I don't even know what you can call this. Either way, I hate it a lot, and the ambience just becomes even more suspenseful if we pick the right act options. And the design of this creature is horrifying. The 6 legs that shape the silhouettes of dogs, the gaping black hole on its face that can also leak this black liquid if we get it excited, its daunting size, all of that just makes it completely freaky, man. We're technically given the ability to ignore it, but it doesn't matter because no matter where we look, it is there. If we try to pet the creature, it falls asleep for a moment, but suddenly jolts back up and crawls wildly on the walls. Bars. All these strange details and its eerie features just make this creature extremely memorable for me. But after finally talking about him, I'm starting to realize how similar this creature is to the rest of the monsters we fight down here. I saw this dude for the first time while watching my sister play this game, and I guess since he scared me so bad, that's why I remember him the most. However, there is one creature I want to talk about that I do believe is very different from the rest of the creatures we fight down here. We can first encounter them in this room. Right now it's full of fog, so the room really serves no purpose until we get the fog out. We can still try to explore the room with the fog in there, but we just get these very ambiguous descriptions of the stuff we interact with. One thing I would like to note though is if we look hard enough, we can interact with something that says, there's something here, something in the shape of a man. I don't know, I thought that was just freaky when I first read it, so I thought I might as well bring it up. But after we get the fog out and come back to the room, we see all these refrigerators that we can interact with them, but nothing too noteworthy happens. It's only until we get to the last one. This battle seems like it's straight out of a creepypasta, but why I find this fight so fascinating is because of the backstory behind it. So something I feel like all of you might be wondering is, what the heck are these? They're like these white masses that resemble a human until they transform and become, this. So when you first enter the True Lab, you can run into these entry logs on the wall telling you the events of the scientist experiments that have gone on down here. So in this game, a majority of the characters you run into are monsters, and monsters, at least when it comes to their biology, are completely different than humans. One of the things that separates humans from monsters is our ability to have determination. Determination in this universe isn't just a feeling, but it's what allows us, the player, to save and reset. Along with this though, you can also extract determination from humans, and you can inject it into, other humans, monsters, and even objects. But in this game, we see what happens when you do extract determination and put it into things that aren't built to have it. For example, if you get determination and just go extracting it into random flowers you see in a field, there's a chance you can run into this. And if you extract determination into monsters, well, they become these. When we read these entry logs on the walls, we learn that Alphys, in an attempt to save dying monsters, injected them with determination. Even though these monsters seem like they were on the brink of death, injecting them with determination actually managed to get them a little better. But as I told you earlier, things don't entirely work out when you inject a monster with determination. If you go in the game's files, you can find a missing entry number that you can't find in the game. We learn that if a monster is given too much determination, not only do they begin to melt, but if they come in contact with another monster, they sort of begin this weird fusion. Every monster we run into down here is not just a melted monster that was given too much determination, it's that and others combined into one, or rather melted into one. Just like imagine you go to the doctor because you're feeling a little down, you might have the flu, and they operate on you, they do whatever it takes to get you better, and you're sent off home, and when things seem like they're getting a little bit better, you begin to melt. And if you have family nearby and you come into contact with them, you permanently change their life forever by fusing with them. I saw this super dope comic of Sans and Papyrus being injected with determination. Well, no, it wasn't Sans, it was Papyrus. He got injected with determination, and whenever it seemed like he was starting to get better, he began fusing with Sans, and they created this weird monster dude called SIXBONES. And I don't know, I think that's cool. But it's not cool because the things these monsters create when they fuse together, they're freaky, they're really scary. basically. And the names of these monsters are called amalgamates, which, you know, is fitting. Earlier in the game, in this snowy area called Snowden, you can encounter two monsters that look similar to each other. And if you paid attention, they also look similar to this monster. These two monsters are referred to as snowdrakes, and they're actually related. The one wearing the shades is the father, I'm pretty sure. The one that isn't is his son, and that means that this one is... and what makes this even more tragic is the only way we can beat this monster is by saying jokes. And when you fight the other two snowdrakes, they're comedians. They like joking around and they appreciate when you laugh at their stuff. So it's almost like you're reminding her of happier times. Times when she was with her joke-telling family. There's several moments down here actually that really humanize these monsters despite them being monsters. Of course, there's the backstory behind them, but there's the amalgamate that tucks you into bed. That moment is really sweet, and I'm sorry I kind of just skipped it whenever I showed y'all, but there's a lot of moments like that down here that I kind of just had to move past because it would take away from the horror of the situation as well. I bring them up now though because despite how absolutely terrifying these monsters are down here, they're really just like us, and I don't know, that's just really tragic. It's the craziest thing to me that the true lab is the most overlooked area in the game. No one talks about it, and that honestly makes me really mad. The area is just interesting, and the fact that Undertale becomes a horror game when you enter this place, I just think that would have made it a little bit more memorable, but apparently not. I might know one big reason though for why this place is overlooked. So earlier in the video, I mentioned these entry numbers that we have to read in order to learn the experiments that happen down in the true lab, right? And I mentioned how one of these entry numbers were missing from the game, and you have to go into the files to find it. I am pretty sure this entry number is the number 17. But what's weird is that there are two missing entry numbers, and both of them are entry number 17. Y'all have already seen the first one, but I believe it's the second entry number 17 that causes this place to be overlooked. The reason I believe it's this entry number that causes the true lab to be overlooked is because of its special connection with a unique character. If you've been a fan of Undertale for a while, I think you know who I'm talking about. WD Gaster. The best word I can use to describe this dude is anomaly. We know basically nothing about this character still, and yet he's probably brought the most chaos to the fanbase aside from Skeleton Daddy. Whenever this guy is brought up in an Undertale video, immediately afterwards whoever is behind the video creates some bizarre theory about him. I don't got that, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know nothing about this dude. There are just a few hints of this guy's existence in Undertale and Deltarune, and basically all of them can be extremely unnerving. Now I might just be overhyping this a bit, but if you're lucky enough to run into any of these hints in the game, they can be at least a little unsettling. The first hints I want to discuss involve these gray characters. These little guys are called G followers. As you can assume, the G in their name probably stands for Gaster. And if you get the chance to talk to these guys, they give you a little bit of information on Gaster. They talk about how he was the scientist before Alphys, and another one of them tells us that in one of Gaster's experiments, something went wrong and he fell into one of his machines, and that sent him across all the timelines. But they phrase it as Gaster was shattered across timelines, which is just a very existentially horrific thing to me. But one of the most weird things these guys have to say about Gaster comes from this guy. I hate that so much, dude. I have a thing with like people watching me without me knowing, and the fact that this game just like tells us directly that we've had a spectator throughout our entire playthrough that we weren't even aware of, it just sends chills down my spine. Some other stuff these guys mention is how he's been like completely forgotten. In the Undertale universe, even though Gaster technically exists, nobody remembers him, and it is basically as if he didn't exist. We can play this game like basically hundreds of times and get just a few hints about him. Another odd hint of this guy's existence in this game game can be found when you first begin a new save. It's on this screen you're given the option to name the fallen human. Usually you'd either name it, your name or a name of a character in the game. If you type in a character's name from the game, you'll most likely get the little quirky message. But if you try to put Gaster's name here, the game doesn't jump scare you, the game doesn't say nothing quirky, the game doesn't even say anything at all. It literally just resets the game completely. It treats it as you just rebooting the game. And that's sort of reaching fourth wall breaking territory with this character. That kind of violates some rules in gaming and kind of makes us feel, well, at least it makes me feel unsafe. I don't know why, but when I was a kid and I learned of this secret, when I was, just obsessed with learning about Gaster secrets, it really messed me up for some reason, and I don't understand why. But I don't know a game where you could do something that causes it to completely reset on itself and it be intentional. Whenever the game resets, I just get this malicious intent behind it. That sounds stupid now that I'm saying it out loud, but you know what? The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to Gaster, well, for this section at least, is the stuff we can find from him in the files. I don't know why I forgot to mention this, but if you look on Undertale's files, you could find this one file called ABC_123_A. It's an audio file that has two different variations, one that came out whenever the game was released and the recent one. I'm gonna play both and we're just gonna move on because I'm not gonna try explaining what they mean because I don't know.
Hello, have some respect and don't spoil the game. It's impossible to have mysteries nowadays.
Because of nosy people like you.
Please keep all of this between us. If you post it online, I won't make any more secrets. No one will be impressed. It will be your fault.
So if we go into the files of Undertale, like I said earlier, we could find his missing entry number. I've been bringing this up over and over again, and I'm sure you're wondering what the heck it is. And I'm not gonna say anything, I'm just gonna show it to you. This font is called Wingdings. If you don't have a decoder and you just look at these random sentences, it just looks like nonsense. But everything you just saw were coherent sentences. But if we translate these Wingdings to English, we get the following. Entry number 17. Dark, darker, yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think? I'm assuming you don't know what that means, and I can't give you an answer because we still to this day don't know what it means. There's so much mystery and confusion about this character, and I just think that makes his presence all the more eerie. And to top it off, there are other hints of Gaster in the files, but all of these hints connect him to the letter 6 and the tripled version of that, which, I think you get where I'm going. I don't know why I'm beating around the bush. The game basically treats him as Satan. Really bizarre, and I don't know what that's gonna mean in the future. But overall, I think this character is gonna be one of the most unnerving in this game and in Deltarune, which, as we're gonna see in a bit, he is really involved in that game as well. Whenever Undertale is brought up in a discussion, chances are someone's gonna reference something from the Genocide Route. Mainly because we get to see the most interesting Sans content in this route. But kinda like how Gaster makes some people overlook the True Lab, I think because we get the Sans fight this route and everything else involving Sans, a lot of people tend to overlook a lot of the other interesting stuff that happens here. And in that interesting stuff, there is an abundance of really unnerving moments. Usually in a route like this, where you kill everything you come across, across, it isn't too odd because you're kind of required to do that if you want to get stronger. So let's say you approach this game with that mindset. In the first area you're in, we learned that if you want to fight monsters, you have to get into an encounter. You get into encounters as you move around throughout the game. If you get into enough encounters and kill enough monsters in an area, you'll eventually be met with this. The sudden shift from the normal area music to this absolutely terrifying ambience, it basically jump scares you whenever you finally run into it. And for the people that play this game expecting it just to be a basic RPG, they'd be terrified if they ran into this. And what makes it even worse is that the ambience does not go away. You know you're doing the genocide route once you get the ambience, but the moment the ambience begins to play, it will not leave your ears until you enter the next area. And not just the next room, not when you get into a new fight, you have to find basically an entirely new biome. We learn more about the tone of this route whenever we get into our first major boss fight. This is Toriel. She's like our mama throughout the entire game. If you first get the good ending in this game, you grow really attached to this character. But when you're doing the genocide route, the first time you fight her is also the last time you see her. She says to you how she thought she was protecting you from the outside, but she's now learned that she was protecting the outside from you. Whenever you talk to somebody in this game, they each have their own little sound effect for their little letters, if that makes sense. But the usual sound effect we would hear whenever Toriel talks to us is slowed down a bunch now as she passes away basically. The fact that it's just one hit that takes her out too. There's no back and forth physically or even verbally, we just kill her. If you haven't caught on, this is obviously the route where us, the player, are the bad guy. This is not the only character we do this to though. The second major boss fight after this, we also end up one-shotting. And it's to my boy Papyrus. Are you kidding me? I forgot to mention this earlier, but if you don't know what the genocide route is, it's in the name. We kill everything we come across, and even more than that. We have to look for our victims and kill them. And there's one character that catches on before the rest. We already know who he is. It's Sans. Sans is always one of the few people that immediately catches on to someone being kind of fishy. He realized there's a little something wrong with us the moment we leave our fight with Toriel. As we progress throughout the snow area, and as he sees us sort of reject his brother and his attempts to throw puzzles at us, he begins to see us as a threat. But despite this, he doesn't do anything. He does give us one warning though. Before we get into our fight with Papyrus, Sans points out how we're about to face our final battle with him. He tells us that if we keep on going down the path we're on now, this is of course one of the huge reasons why everyone loves Sans. And even though this isn't a Sans video, I kind of can see that moment being a little freaky, so that's why I put it in here. But we of course ignore his request, warning, whatever. We ignore him and we kill the best character in the game. Before we move on to the rest of what happens in this route, I want to address one of the main things this route preaches to us throughout the entire time we play it, and that is how we are the monster. This route goes out of its way to really guilt you with every action you do. It treats you like the murderer you are. There's this shop we can enter where we would usually meet a very sweet shopkeeper, and when we enter the shop where we would usually be given the option to buy, this option is now replaced with the option to steal. So all of the items that we would normally be able to buy here, we could just take for free. And we can also just snag all of the money from the shopkeeper. But there's one note left behind, and all that's written down from her is her asking us to not hurt her family. It's really unsettling being called out on your actions in a game like this. The main game antagonist really rubs it in that we are also the worst. But karma will eventually come to us. And when I was recording the footage for this video, I went through it real bad. We eventually reach Sans and we fight him.
No! No! No!
No! No! Despite our love for this frickin' prick over here, we have to kill him in order to see what else the game has in store for us. So after many attempts that were super close at defeating Sans, we finally managed to beat him.
I did it! Oh my gosh! Dude! Oh my gosh!
And we can face the king. But before we begin a discussion with the king, we hear him say to himself how he's never seen a flower cry. The context behind what he means here is, well, before we got to the king's room, palace, whatever, we had a one-on-one discussion with the main antagonist, Flowey. However, he thinks we're someone else, and instead of him being an antagonizing force towards us, he sees us as a sibling, I guess, and is really chill towards us. And as he begins opening up to us about a lot of stuff he's been through, he begins to notice an eerie smile form on our face. But before we can actually do anything, we get into our fight with Sans and deal with him. So I guess during our fight with Sans, Flowey rushed over to the king to warn him about us, so he can be prepared and defeat us whenever we come. The king turns around and notices us, but doesn't see us as any monster or even a human. He just assumes that we're a unique type of monster. One thing I'd like to note is the king is well aware what a child looks like. He's adopted a human child before, and he's been forced to murder several human children. So that just goes to show how far gone we are at this point. When it looks like we're about to finally battle him, he instead asks us to calm down and offers us some tea. But as soon as he's done talking, we kill him instantly. But before his soul can completely shatter, Flowey comes in to snag the final blow. He does this to sort of salvage his relationship with us and trying to save his own skin. But from here on out, what us the player wants to do, we can't really act on it because somebody else is in control. This is Kara. The moment we're left alone, face to face with them, you immediately feel a type of energy from them that just intimidates you, despite them looking like a child. And we're completely isolated with them in this black void area. It really feels like there's no point of return from here. After talking to Kara for a bit, they tell us that this is where it ends and ask us to erase the world with them. And like I said before, even if we didn't want to, after this, the screen goes black and it really feels like there's nothing else from here. And you can just leave the game at that and accept that ending. But if you wait long enough, Kara will begin talking to you again and ask if we want to go back. If we do, they're willing to make a trade. If we give them our soul, they'll let us reset everything. If we go through with this and we begin the game again, everything is basically back to normal. No eerie fourth wall breaking from Flowey, nothing from Sans and him being suspicious of our behavior. The game seems absolutely normal. If you manage to do the good ending in this game, you take the time to build all of these relationships in the game, befriend all of the monsters, do everything you have to do in order to get the good ending, and you reach the end credits expecting to have a nice, simple, happy ending until you get to the final cutscene. If you can't tell already, I take the scary moments in this game really seriously. I was trying really hard to immerse you into this genocide route, and at the time of recording, I didn't realize I kind of skipped over some stuff. You have the basic idea though that this route is much more darker and much more freaky, and any other creepy words you can use to describe anything. It's creepy. It's so much creepier than the rest of the game. And in fact, all of the moments I just talked about just now, everything that goes down in the True Lab, all of Gaster's stuff, it all goes overlooked in the Undertale community, which bothers me so deeply. No one talks about these moments. Why does nobody talk about these moments? Some of the stuff I just told y'all sounds like it's straight out of a creepypasta. Like the Genocide Route stuff, where there's moments in the game where it's like, we know you're here playing this game and we're watching. It doesn't do that, but it's like it breaks the fourth wall, and that in itself can be scary. And of course, there's always so much I could talk about when it comes to Undertale. I didn't even cover everything when it comes to the scary stuff that can happen in this game, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm really excited for what we're about to dive into. Y'all go ahead and discuss the other creepy moments I skipped over down in the comments. I'd love to be reminded of any moments that I might have forgotten, or of stuff I didn't know existed. But enough about Undertale. It's now time to move on to what is probably my most favorite game of all time. I love Deltarune, man. This game is very similar to Undertale. Like, most of the game mechanics are basically identical, and there are characters that are just straight from Undertale in Deltarune. So it's clear that these games are connected, but Deltarune isn't like a prequel or even a sequel to Undertale. Despite these two game similarities, it's the horrors of these games that separate themselves from each other. This is not always the case, but mainly Undertale uses scary imagery to scare us, and Deltarune can sometimes do that, but why I find this game horrifying sometimes is just how real this game can be. There are moments in this game where we see people like genuinely lose it, and usually in media, moments like these are seen as funny or stupid, but in Deltarune, when we see these people lose their minds, it's like uncomfortable. And we see the most of what I'm talking about in Deltarune's second chapter. I love chapter 1 of Deltarune, but mainly all the scary stuff I want to talk about is in chapter 2. I will be bringing up chapter 1 every once in a while, but this entire video segment of Deltarune is for the most part gonna be discussing chapter 2. Speaking of chapter 2, let me give you a rundown of that game's story. Chapter 2 is a very fascinating experience because on the surface, it just seems like another addition to the game. You get new characters, new music, more fights, and of course, more story. I would love to give you a full breakdown of the story just because I love chapter 2, but kinda like how I did with Undertale, I'm gonna skip like a majority of this chapter's story and just tell you what you need to know so you can understand better the horrors of what I'll be diving into when it comes to chapter 2. What y'all need to know is that in this chapter, we play as a character named Chris, and we have an ex-friend named Noelle, and she ends up getting kidnapped by the antagonist of the chapter, Queen. And we manage to separate Noelle from Queen, but we still get put into situations where us and Noelle run into Queen. In one of the times we run into Queen, us and Noelle hop in a car with her, and we're driving down this road just zooming through several cars, and we eventually hit a roadblock, and Queen asks us to walk over and hit a button that'll clear up the road for us. And as we go do this task, I bring up again that this game can be uncomfortable. I say this now because this guy, this small little man, is one of the most fascinating characters in this game, if not, at least up to this point, the most fascinating. This guy is named Spamton G. Spamton. He talks in a very sporadic manner and somehow manages to constantly interrupt himself, and in this first encounter with him, he basically constantly projects onto the player, or rather, the character we play as, Chris. It's clear that he sees something within them that reminds him of himself. One of the things he projects onto Chris is asking them if their cells have gone down the drain. Through this line of dialogue we just saw, it's clear that this guy is a salesman, and he strikes a battle with us, but rather than trying to actually defeat us, he's constantly making deals throughout the fight. In one of his attempts to make a deal with us, we see him mention how he was only ever in the salesman business for well, that doesn't make much sense. Before each turn of you and your enemy attacking each other, we see bottom text appear at the bottom black box. That makes things even weirder. Like when we see text repeat over and over, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong. Or when we see text describe Spamton mutters 1997. For Deltarune, where we're constantly getting really bizarre fights, this fight is definitely one of the more weird ones. Well, at least after we finish our fight, he invites us over to his We go to the garbage dump and we interact with this talking trash can, and he tells us about some dude muttering to himself about deals that went over to the left. Obviously this is Spamton, so we go left and we see this little hole in this wall up here. Well, like there are a bunch of these holes, but I don't know what you call this. We basically go in the biggest hole there is, and it's just this gray door. This is Spamton's shop, where he sells you a variety of items, all at the low price of... We can ask him a couple of questions, but nothing he says makes too much sense. Spamton was fixing to talk about a very mysterious character within this game's story, yet before he can even begin the discussion, he's sort of bugged out. We can't talk about the knight anymore, so let's just ask him about his friends. Very weird still, but what about his fears? It looks like the moments where his eyes go all staticky are sort of him breaking free of whatever is making him talk like a madman. We'll explore more of what this means in a bit, but let's first talk about how absolutely eerie it is talking with this dude in his shop. Usually when we enter a shop in this game, we see the shopkeeper fade in along with the shop theme song, Hip Shop. This song makes us feel welcome and lets us know that this is a place of safety. But when we enter Spamton's shop, he just pops in suddenly along with the song Dial Tone playing in the back. Dial Tone is almost the exact opposite of Hip Shop. It's awkward, it's creepy, and it fills the player with a deep dread. Throughout the song, there are these long pauses that drag it out, and it's in these pauses that build up the player's anxiety. Also throughout the song, we can hear a phone ringing. We see the phone behind Spamton in this weird glitched out dark void area, and it seems really random for this phone to be here, but just remember it. Since earlier Spamton asked us to come alone here, we feel very alone and secluded with him. This isolation makes our eerie interactions with him all the more powerful. Lastly, we'll ask him about our deal. And he says a lot of confusing stuff here, but the simplest way I can put it for you is that he wants us to go to the Queen's mansion, to find her basement, and to use an item that we can buy off of him, the keygen, to break through a barrier that would block us from entering the basement. After we get in the basement, our goal is to find Spamton, a broken disc. The basement is right behind the True Lab when it comes to how scary it is, because it may not be directly horrifying like the True Lab, but there are several unsettling moments that could occur down here. When we first enter the basement, we see two hallways that we can go down. One of these hallways is blocked by a force field, so naturally, we go down the other way. Down here, however, there are these plug enemies that we have to dodge in order to reach the end of the hallway. A large majority of people that play this game assume these plug guys are just some random enemies, but something odd happens if we get to a safe place and just look at them. Along with seeing these eerie secrets, there's this ambient humming we hear in the background throughout most of the basement that makes all the weird stuff go down here even more creepy. But nonetheless, we turn off the force field, go through whatever mess this is, and we can now go down the previously blocked hallway. We enter a room with train tracks going to the right, and also to the right is this room that we can enter. In here are like these compartments of some sort. Most of them are empty until we reach the last one and see this odd hanging husk of a body, completely isolated and alone while being covered in vines. We interact with it and find the empty disc Spamton told us to retrieve, so we take it and return to Spamton. And Spamton's ecstatic, bro. I mean, he's losing it. He asks us not to be greedy and to hand over the disc so he can transfer his hyperlinked blocked, whatever that means. And he tells us that after everything is done, to go put the disc back where we found it, and we agree to transfer. The music cutting out while we see his shop get the literal life sucked out of it is really scary, dude. There's nothing else to do here, so we just do what Spamton originally requested from us. This begins the hardest fight in the chapter. The entire time from the moment we met Spamton, he was scheming this, but apparently things didn't go entirely to plan. In his words, he believed the power he got from this body would bring him freedom. As you can see on screen, he has literally become a puppet hanging from strings that are presumably controlling his actions. He tells us how it's still dark, so dark. He also mentions how he needs us to be big with him. The battle begins, and like in his last fight, we get some eerie text that pops up at the bottom black box. I'm just gonna read it out to you, and I'll elaborate on what some of this text means later. The air crackles with freedom. Spamton turns to the audience and laughs. Spamton appeals to the audience with a festive jig. Spamton begs to the audience. Spamton prays to the audience. Spamton begs the audience to stop taking the furniture out of his room. There is no audience. The song that plays during the fight, Big Shot, first off, it's a banger. It's just a certified bop. But there's this one part in Spamton's song that could be kind of overlooked because of the loud music playing, but I'm going to play that one part of the song for you right now, and I just want you to listen carefully. Did you hear it? It's okay if you didn't. I just had an excuse to play the best part of the song, so I'm very happy right now. But if you're a little confused, basically what you just heard was Spamton talking. A few great people have found a way to isolate his vocals, and we now have a way to hear pretty clearly what he says.
Think of something from the inside of the phone. Hand play till you're all alone. It pulls strings and make it ring until your heart turns red. Think of something from the inside of the phone. Hand play till you're all alone. Pulls strings and make it strings until you want to be a bitch.
This just adds to the list of the very confusing things that have been going on with Spamton so far. There's a lot of lore behind these lyrics probably, but I'm not gonna touch that, just including it here because it's unsettling hearing him talk like this. And the stuff that he says here, even though it's a little confusing, it's still pretty creepy. During this fight with Spamton, in order to beat him peacefully, we have to free him from his strings. This is where I would like to really dive into the horror of Spamton. Spamton himself is an odd, creepy little dude, but I've kind of been beating around the bush when it comes to talking about why he is like this. Spamton, throughout all of our encounters with him, tells us how he wants to make it big, to become a big shot. We learned that he actually did succeed in making it big, but not alone. It's said in the game that he made the right phone call and was found by somebody. After this, he was on the phone all the time, and it was here where he began to greatly succeed when it comes to selling his products and got onto the path of becoming the big shot he'd had always wanted to become. His friends ditched him out of jealousy, but that didn't bother him. He even got himself a nice place in the Queen's mansion. We hear from a butler in this mansion that Spamton spent a lot of his free time praying in the Queen's basement. I was honestly thrown off when I first heard this and was a little unsettled. We don't know what or who he was praying to, but I'd like to believe it was the robot he'd eventually put his own conscience into. No real reason for me to think this, it's just the image in my head of him praying to it is creepy to think of, and I like torturing myself like that. But despite Spamton's efforts to maintain his status, his help suddenly vanished and he was left alone. It was clear now how he got to his high position, because as soon as his backing left, his sales dropped and he lost everything. Everything comes full circle. So I brought up earlier how Spamton had a phone in his shop that was in that weird black void area, and in our final fight with him, A lot of his attacks have something to do with phones. Overall, he just had an odd connection to phones that we really just didn't understand until right now. It was a phone call that made his life, so naturally, when he lost everything, he would make sure to keep that phone next to him just in case if his help were to ever reach back out, he'd be ready. But his help never came. After this, Spamton became, in his words, desperate. He always kept trying though until he thought he found his one-way ticket to his success, us. And then we see all of the events that lead Spamton to, once again, fail. Although Spamton's mental health was rapidly declining, he still always tried his best to achieve his goals, whether it was the goal of being a big shot or being free. He kept at it. But what makes his situation so real is how he, despite his efforts, failed. Always. And when he thought things were finally going to get better, when the last string was cut, he felt like an empty husk. It was disturbing seeing Spamton's mentally unwell behavior, but there's a whole different level of fear when we see him go through this constant failure. Spamton's obsession with freedom also has its share of eerie moments. I don't know for sure why he's so obsessed with freedom, or what he's even trying to be free from, but Spamton's drive for his freedom, being one of his main character traits, ended up creating a lot of really uncomfortable moments with him. But Spamton isn't one of the only characters that's constantly shackled by their lack of freedom. Let's talk about the protagonist, Chris. When we first meet Spamton, Chris is also extremely put off by him. Them emoting like this is very important because Chris is characterized to not really be a reactive or emotional individual. This all changes with Spamton though. In both Deltarune and Undertale, there is meta storytelling in them. What made Undertale so unique when compared to other games was that some characters in the game were aware of your player abilities, such as you being able to reset, save the game, all that stuff, right? But in Deltarune, the focus is less on your abilities as the player and more on the player's relationship to the game and its characters. Chris is a character that is entirely separate from the player. We just have control of their body so we can play the game. Chris has some degree of awareness when it comes to us and our control of their body, and they don't like not being in control of what they're able to do in their own body. So at certain points in the game, they take control back. But when they do this, they slouch around almost zombie-like. They need us, even if they don't want to. So imagine what is going through their mind when they see what happens to Spamton after we beat him. After we finish fighting Spamton, before we can completely walk out of the basement, one of our friends, Susie, by the way, she's also very important, but she's like not relevant at all to this video, so we can't really talk about her. But she brings up how weird it is that we just moved on from what we just witnessed. Our other friend, Rouse, says to not worry about it too much. Susie asks Chris how they're doing since she noticed that they have goosebumps. We tell Susie and Rouse that no, we're not okay after what we just saw, and we see Rouse directly comment on how Chris was yelling when they said this. Keep in mind, Chris is like a high schooler, so just imagine the kind of stuff that's going through their mind right now at such a young age. But since we're on the topic of Chris and their lack of free will, we can very smoothly transition onto the next section of the video. Also, last interruption in the video, hopefully, there is one eerie encounter we have in this game that I forgot to bring up in the script. Basically, in both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, there are these hidden rooms you can find if you just walk back and forth between two specific rooms. And when you finally get the room, you find this tree with someone hiding behind it. And it's really perplexing running into this, especially if you have no awareness of what this room is. The music is unsettling. It isn't actually scary, but just odd. Very odd, and for how random it is, that can really throw some people off. If you go behind the tree and interact with a person who is described to be a man standing behind it, he just gives you an egg and disappears. You can get 2 eggs from this dude, both from the time you can run into him in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. And you could do random stuff with these eggs in the overworld of the game, but it's just odd that you're given this ability. We don't know why we're able to do this, but it's interesting to see it still because it's probably going to be important in later chapters. The next thing I would like to talk about is this game's version of the Genocide Route. In this game though, instead of the bad route being called the Genocide Route, it's been referred to as the Weird Route. This route begins relatively tame, however we do have to defeat every enemy we come across. This isn't too bad though, since before we can actually do anything fatal to them, they just run away. But there's a point in the game where we finally get Noelle, our ex-friend, on our team. Noelle is a very likable character, but something happened in the past that strained her relationship with Chris, So when she joins our team, things are a little awkward. But normally we can do things in the game that allow us to grow closer to her and become actual friends by the end of our playthrough. This isn't a normal route though, so once Noelle joins our team, where we would usually just move on, to begin the weird route, we actually have to backtrack so we can re-encounter the enemies we fought on the way up here. But y'all may be thinking right now, why would we do this if I already said that whenever we beat an opponent, we can't actually kill them? We'd just be wasting our time, right? Well... This time though, when we use this move Ice Shock, if it's used to finish off an opponent, it freezes them and kills them. So after each fight we go through, we make sure to use only Ice Shock. And when we defeat an opponent, we see their frozen corpse just out in the open. These corpses do not leave, they stay here the entire game. This begins a very unsettling development between us and Noelle's relationship. As we backtrack to kill our enemies, we have to go to where Spamton's shop is in the garbage dump. Enemies never usually spawn here, but if you're doing the route correctly, you have to fight a couple of dudes before you can check out Spamton's shop. Something I would like to bring up is if you kill enough enemies, you can hear an odd sound effect that lets us know that Noelle got stronger. This sound effect almost becomes haunting after hearing it enough times. It's like each time you hear it, it's like a direct reminder of what kind of bad things you are doing. We go to the door that leads to Spamton's shop, but it's locked. We can now move forward in the game. We just have to make sure that if we see an enemy, we have to engage them in battle and freeze them. We eventually reach a salesman that usually just scams us or something, and they assume that us and Noelle are dating. Noelle tells them it's not like that, but she can't quite figure out what we are either. She asks us what we think we are. There's the option to say we're friends or we're something else. The right answer is to say we're friends, but you already know how this route goes. We pick something else, and Noelle is obviously confused by this, but we just move on like nothing strange was just said. Yeah, you get what I mean when this game gets dark. It's one thing killing people of your own free will like in Undertale, but it feels evil pressuring this naturally sweet girl into killing innocent people. But she sees our weird behavior of pressuring her to kill everyone as just us trying to make her stronger. This usually loud and upbeat town becomes quiet and empty. We get some interesting dialogue when we interact with this Ferris wheel poster. And right after this, something really weird happens when we cross this force field. Usually, Noelle will tell us to get ready to cross when she steps on this button to deactivate the force field. But now when we begin to cross, we notice Noelle fidget a bit. We hear the sound effect that lets us know that Noelle got stronger, and the music finally comes back but is slightly altered and slowed down. From here, a bunch of the puzzles we normally have to solve in order to move on are either frozen, or we pressure Noelle to freeze them. And like in the Genocide Route, at this point in the game, we get a number on how many more enemies we have to kill, and if we kill enough enemies, our lovely little salesman Spamton, oh that little guy, Spamton sells us a ring. After we get the ring, Spamton tells us that it might sting, and that's because it's a ring of thorns, and it does make Noelle a lot stronger, but it also hurts her. Now this would normally be seen as a double-edged sword situation. She gets a lot stronger at the price of health, but this item isn't actually meant to help us because we only get to use it in one fight, which we'll get to in a sec. Us putting this ring of thorns onto Noelle adds to our cruelty towards her, because in our pursuit to make Noelle stronger, even if it makes her bleed, we still demand her to put the ring of thorns on. Along with all the stuff I just said, there are some other really uncomfortable implications we could take from this one gesture of us making her put on the ring of thorns. We'll dive into that in a bit. After we put the ring on Noelle, we encounter a kid named Berkeley. He's usually like the comedic, egotistical antagonist turned friend at the end of the chapter. He's still an antagonist at this point, but instead of him attacking us for his own selfish reasons, he fights because he realizes Noelle is possibly being hurt by us. But when Noelle sees him, she just sees another enemy and asks if we want her to just kill him. The intense music kicking in whenever Noelle notices Birdly as Birdly, and the music that plays during the fight between us and Birdly sets the tone for something very bad approaching. In this fight, we notice a new move called Snowgrave. After some setting up, we select the move. This is probably the darkest moment in this route, no, the darkest moment in the game, and it's really chilling how we just move on. Noelle, of course, is deeply affected by this, but we don't see her react much and she just walks away. When we interact with his ice cocoon, it just says that it's hard to see through. There's nothing else to do here other than to just move on. We reach the Queen's Mansion, but something's very different. Spamton has now completely taken over the Queen's Mansion. If we go to the basement, it's of course locked, but we can actually hear Spamton behind it. He also has his face plastered everywhere. His theme is playing in the background constantly, and there are these blue egg clam things called peepas scattered everywhere. The story of the game is surprisingly normal aside from everything I just told you. Everything normal about the game is just quicker though. This normalcy stops though when we enter this room. Spamton pulls up on us suddenly and he is not happy. He tells us that he doesn't want us to steal the fountain, which is this. It basically allows Spamton to exist. He calls us and Noelle out for making what? Well, Hyperlink blocked, of course. I am not gonna open the whole can of worms behind this simple phrase. Just know that its relevancy in the game is still basically unknown, but I saw a really good YouTube video that brings up a theory on how whenever Spamton uses the word Hyperlink blocked, it's a stand-in for the word love. Check out the video if you're interested, by the way. If Hyperlink blocked does somehow mean love, then what Spamton says here is just all the more weird. Spamton also says other distressing stuff. He calls us out for killing Birdly, but he words it as, you think making frozen chicken with your side chick is gonna let you drink up that sweet, sweet freedom sauce? We continue the battle until Spamton is almost defeated. At this point, Spamton goes into this high defense state. Basically, if we attack him, it does like no damage. We make Chris call out to their friends, Susie, Rouse, but nobody came. But when we're given the option to call to Noelle, things change. Instead of the game phrasing it as Chris called out to their friends, it says, you whispered Noelle's name. Spamton is appalled that you tried to call her of all people, which is understandable, especially after everything you've done to her, and he aptly roasts you. After we defeat Spamton, we go back to the normal world, and Noelle thinks that everything that just happened was a dream, and that's an understandable assessment of what just happened. It's until she tries to wake up Birdly and realizes he won't budge. She just brushes this off though and just assumes that he's just really tired. It's also noticeable that Noelle seems oddly cheerful and like really confident. This confidence becomes obvious whenever she interacts with Susie. Noelle leaves, and aside from Susie acknowledging that things seem like they're much more grim, the game is normal from here on out except for one last area. Us and Susie go to the town's hospital, and we find a room where Noelle's hanging out with her dad. When she notices us, she notices Chris first, which is such an important detail. Normally, she'd notice Susie first. Her dad brings up how Susie is the girl that Noelle talks about all the time, and Noelle dips out immediately after, because she's embarrassed, of course. And she still does do this, but just the detail of her noticing us first is so important, and remember this because I'm about to dive into it in a sec. We leave the room after she does too, and we get a little insight on Noelle's thoughts on the whole situation. Before we can tell her it wasn't a dream, Susie interrupts and then Noelle quickly leaves. The game, for real this time, is completely normal from here to end. Like there isn't more directly scary content apart from this bunker that we'll dive into in a sec. I know I keep on saying this, but trust me, right now is where I drop everything onto y'all. This route is super bizarre, especially when you remember that there wasn't anything like this route in the previous chapter. In chapter 1, the ending is basically the same if you attack everyone or not. I don't know what this route means for the future of the game, but it was really uneasy playing through this for the first time on stream. It's pretty obvious that this bad route is similar to Undertale's. We kill everyone, we fight, we ruin relationships with people that we could be friends with, but despite us looking more ruthless than Undertale's bad route, this game's bad route seems somehow more dark and very personal. The way we just constantly push Noelle to do things that she doesn't want to do because we know she's a pushover and doesn't have the spine to deny us. It's all just really gross and I sympathize with her. She is really confused with what's going on and only has us, the player, to guide her throughout the game. There's also a lot of odd romantic implications with us and Noelle. I don't know if it's necessarily only us, the player, or Chris themselves, or it could even be both. But either way, the fact that there's romantic implications is still really weird. And us giving her 2 rings, which is a gesture that can be seen as a proposal, along with us telling the salesman that us and Noelle are something else, along with Spamton basically telling us that we've been making love to our Hochi mama, his stand-in name for Noelle, along with us also telling her, or rather demanding her, to go on the Ferris wheel with us. I bring these moments up not because I ship these 2 characters, heck no, but because I want to make clear of the power dynamic we use against Noelle. Noelle is a big pushover as is, but something I haven't mentioned yet is her natural interest to things that scare her. This trait about her might be a reference to the phrase caught like a deer in headlights, which is a thing that happens in life where a deer runs in the middle of a road and stares at a car going 100 freaking miles per hour and just running them over. It's almost as if they're attracted to this massive heap of metal charging towards them at this high speed. We learn of Noelle's interest in things that scare her when she tells Susie directly while they're hanging out on their Ferris wheel. This could also explain her attraction to Susie because normally in the game, Susie is portrayed as this big mean girl who's rough and tough and smacks people. I don't know. When I said earlier that deers can sometimes be attracted to this huge hunk of metal that's charging towards them, Susie at this point is the huge hunk of metal for Noelle. However, on the weird route, us the player lays out our territory as being the most biggest dangerous person Noelle is in contact with, I guess. We have several moments where we genuinely freak out Noelle, and the detail of her noticing us first instead of Susie kinda makes things obvious. Even if she doesn't want it, we're gonna live rent-free in her head. We have an absurd amount of power over her, and in this route, we take any chance we can to let her know to only obey us, so she can also have power. We treat her like a damn dog, it's honestly upsetting. And one of the saddest things about this is Chris, the character we play as throughout the game, does not want this. In this route, Chris may be literally telling Noelle to do these horrible actions, but it's us controlling them to do this. And we see this clearly whenever we call out to Chris's friends at the end of the fight. Chris has to call out their friends several times, only to be met with no response. But the moment us, the player, whispers Noelle's name, she's there. And there's also the few moments where us, the player, literally invade Noelle's mind. The one place of privacy and safety that's truly hers. All these screwed up things we make her go through start to really get to her, and at the end of the chapter, she's at the point that just talking to us almost makes her break down. It's really sad to see, and we're most likely going to see another route like this in the future chapters. If it's gonna be to Noelle we do this crap to, or another in the character in the game, we'll just have to wait and see. And we have wrapped up most of everything I wanted to talk about with Deltarune. However, I'm gonna send off this section of the video showing y'all what happens when we walk up to the bunker I mentioned earlier. these two games, for them having some of the most wholesome, uplifting moments in any game I will ever play, they can also be so dark, so scary, and very uncomfortable. I have been a huge fan of how Gaster was teased in Undertale. Oh crap. He's like a horror character with how unsettling his hints are in the game and in the files. But I just want to give a quick little section to talk about my favorite character right now in media. He isn't my favorite character in media. That goes to a couple other people, but I like this character a lot. Spamton. We all know I like Spamton. I did an entire thing for him with his hair. I don't know. I haven't done it yet, but I know I'm gonna do something cool with his hair. Not cool. It's something I like Spamton. I first ignored him whenever Chapter 2 first came out 2 years ago, but after playing Deltarune for the first time a couple months ago, and after watching some analysis videos on him, I realized that he's a really well made and tragic character that has a really just a good tight grip on my heart. And by the way, Spamton, this little guy over here, he's a prick. He's not a good guy. I didn't want you to think he's a good guy. I just want you to know that he's kind of human, even though he doesn't look human. He goes through a lot of human stuff, and that's what I liked about him. I hope I did a good job capsulating the scary moments from both of these games and didn't stray too far into theory making or just geeking out about them. These are some of my favorite games after all, and one of them is actually my favorite game. So if it seemed like I was just kind of glazing both of these games, I'm sorry. Thank y'all for dealing with my crap this entire video. There have been a lot of mistakes that have personally bothered me, and I can't really fix them because I gotta get this out. It's beginning to look like this video is gonna be close to an hour long or even over that, which is a channel first. But if I were to ever make a video an hour long for any topic or any piece of media, I'm glad for the first time it was for these two games. If you have managed to make it this far, please consider dropping a like on the video, and maybe even subscribing if you're feeling a little spicy. Any support would be appreciated. Either way though, it's been a minute. I've had to re-record this script, by the way. I've already made this entire script before, and it all got lost on my laptop. I'm gonna take a chill. I'm gonna chill for a bit. If you're at this point in the video, thank you, because I've yapped for like a couple minutes now. I'm gonna go, so as always, I love you all so much. Y'all are awesome. Just thank you guys so much. I'm gonna go. Bye bye.